Welcome to another edition of The Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs, and currently I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today's guest is Miles Schnaer, author of the book Take the Crown: 18 Core Principles to Grow Your Business and Improve Your Life. Miles, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be with you.
Well, Miles, let's start off with you giving us a little bit of background about your professional life, about how you got to where you're at.
Oh boy. Well, it's at midnight where you are. It may take you till 3 o'clock in the morning to listen to all this, but I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and really didn't know what I was going to do. Got uh, flunked out of a junior college, went to another small junior college, then went to Pitt State University in Pittsburgh, Kansas, a year. And my brother-in-law, who was a colonel in the Army, was home from Vietnam at that time, and he said, if you don't join the Army today, you're going to get drafted, you're going to go to Vietnam, and you're going to die. So I ended up joining the service, stayed in for 2.5 years, went back to Pittsburgh, met my wife, who's my wife now, 54 years ago, I guess it is.
Relations.
In the service, I assisted. I was a pathologist. I was a lab technician. I assisted pathologists in autopsies. And so when I got out of the service, I went back to school, got in the pre-med program, graduated, didn't have the grades to get into medical school. And a friend of mine said, "Why don't you try selling cars?" And I did in 1971, and got with an organization that's a big conglomerate in the Kansas City market, the Van Tile organization, who, by the way, sold their 125 franchises in 75 locations for about $7 billion to Berkshire Hathaway a few years ago. I was fortunate enough to get with his organization. He brought me up, put me in a dealership in Illinois, and ended up coming back to Kansas City, bought an auto plaza in 91, and then bought another group of dealerships in Lawrence, Kansas, where the University of Kansas is, in 94. And I've been there ever since. I'm selling interest in a couple of my key guys now in the dealerships. I spend 6 months in Florida, 6 months at home, and I'm involved, if you read the book, very heavily in philanthropics and trying to motivate people to succeed in their own life. And a good friend of mine is a book publisher. About 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer, he tried to talk me into writing a book. He's got a library of books that he's written called Ascend Books, is the name of his company. And as a friend, he just said, "You've got a story to tell, and you should let me write. We should write a book." And I said, "The only person that's going to buy my book is my mother," and I'd end up giving her a book anyway. So it was ludicrous to me. If you want a motivational book, you go find Lynn Dawson or Patrick Mahomes or Walt Disney, somebody like that. But ended up writing the book about 5 years ago. Took about 3.5 years, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be able to do that. It turned out, from what I'm hearing from readers, a very inspirational book. I've had some, Mark, I've said this over the years, I wish I'd had a camera implanted into my eyes so that I could have videoed all the opportunities that I've had in my career to be around very prominent people, the John Woodens of the world, the major business leaders of the world, Ewing Kaufman's. And so, I've had some great opportunities, traveled around the world with Toyota manufacturers to Japan, been on the National Council with General Motors for years, been to Detroit and Washington, D.C., meeting with legislators and presidents of the United States. So a lot of good things has happened to me, and I just feel like sharing my experiences with people in my book can help them and or question maybe what they want to do in their life.
Well, I really enjoyed the book, and I think you've had an amazing career. And so let's jump right into the book. In chapter one, you mentioned that your parents' experiences with discrimination and persecution influence your compassionate outlook. Can you share specific instances where their past directly shaped your actions or decisions in business or community work? So give the audience a little background about your parents.
Well, I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family that taught my sisters and I the values of life. That if you do the right thing, you'll be rewarded for it, and the rewards come in a lot of different packages, I guess, for a better term. Uh, you get rewarded by family, you get rewarded by money, but the thing that I was taught uh, as I grew up, and my grandfather from Poland, which there's a story in there about my grandparents coming from Warsaw, Poland, and my on my mother's side, and my parents from my father's side came from Lafayette, Germany, before the Holocaust and the wars during the early wars over there. But my grandfather was my roommate, and I learned a lot about the Jewish faith. I learned a lot about the reasons why we are where we are. But mainly, I think, and I say my prayers. I still say my prayers every night in Hebrew. I went to Hebrew day school. I got a diploma, and it gave us basically a conscience to do the right thing. And they they instilled the family life to me, and it's what life is all about, is how you live your life and how you treat people, and that will make you succeed. But learning the learning from them, what path that I needed to go down was the right one to go down. Now, I will tell you, I wasn't a perfect child, and I drank alcohol, and early on, before I really got into sports, I smoked a little bit here and there. But I think the main thing is that if you listen uh, and making a having a cornerstone of faith and believe in God will help you down the road.
So you described the moment when you realized you were the only white people in the bar where Felix Hill's band was playing. Looking back, how did you experience impact your understanding of race relations or your approach to diversity and inclusion?
Well, that story of Felix was like there's a movie that's out where, oh, not now, but it was a long time ago, that showed a group of young white guys walking into a bar, and as they came in through the door, the music stopped, and I experienced that same exact feeling when I was a junior in high school. I worked for a company that sold records, 45s and 78s, and I was 16, my first job, and Felix was my manager. Big, tall, 6'2", 6'3", good-looking black gentleman that we got to know, and he was like a father, a big brother figure to me, and Felix and I was like a little brother to him. And so he played in a band in a small little community in Kansas City, and he said, "Hey, you need to bring your buddies over to the bar." We couldn't drink, but he said, "I want you to come over and listen to music," and we did, and and I didn't know it until later on in life, the realization of when I went to when I opened my businesses in Lawrence, where the University of Kansas is, and where Dr. Naismith started basketball in 1891 in Springfield, Massachusetts, and then came to Lawrence as a pastor and an athletic director. The term colorblind is where I learned to be what colorblind meant. You know, you didn't care what the color, the race, the religion that people were. You just treated people like people. And when I walked in that bar and the music stopped and Felix waved at us to come on up, all of a sudden, when the people in the bar knew that we were friends of Felix, the band played and music continued, and we had a great time.
That sounds like a movie.
Yeah, well, it was, and it flashes back to me that I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in was a Catholic neighborhood, and I tell people this a lot, that my friends took me to more midnight masses than I think a lot of people that grew up in that neighborhood had ever been to in the Catholic Church. And actually the priest thought I was Catholic anyway and kept telling me, how come you're not coming to church? And which had to explain that. But I just think that people are people, and there's no reason for the politics of it to make it tougher than what it should be. So that's how I treat people now in my business. You're a customer, you become a friend, doesn't matter who you are, what you are. And I do that whenever I travel around the country. I just think it's ludicrous for what politics does to people's lives.
The internet changed the car business that you were in, where you used to develop. My father loved to buy cars because he loved the negotiation between him and the car dealership. And now you go to buy a car and you just go online. And when you get to the dealership, they go online, they look at what the lowest price in the area is, and they give you that price because they don't want you to leave. There's no more negotiation. My father thought that was the most fun part of buying the car was the negotiation, the back and forth. How much is the internet and maybe now AI changing the car dealership industry?
Well, I think mainly it mainly a good thing. To your point, we have people that are communicating through the internet with us when they look online, because our inventories are online. Our all the product that we have in inventory, and they can get, like I have Toyota, you can get online and find out all the Toyotas that are in the Kansas City market, and then you contact, and we have a complete what we call a business development center where it's all internet related, and you have somebody answering the phone and or the internet, and then you get back with the customer, and they've already picked out a car. We negotiate the price over the phone. You come in and pick up the car and drive it home. So in our aspect of it, there's not a confrontation like there used to be, where you come in and you want to negotiate like your father did. You just come in and you already know the price, you know the color, you got the car ready for you to drive out. So it has made a big difference. It's a little less personable, I guess, for a better term, because we're in a suburb of Kansas City and people can buy the car at our dealership. And since the warranty is good in any Toyota dealership in the country, you can take that car back to Kansas City and have your oil changed, do your marketing, or do your warranty work, and you never come back in the dealership. So it becomes less personable as far as I'm concerned.
You mentioned that Cecil Van Tool, did I say that right? His last name?
Van Tile.
Van Tile, who was also a major car dealership owner in your part of the country, taught you the skill of identifying and developing passion in others. Can you describe specific instances where you applied this skill, and what were the key indicators that helped you recognize and nurture potential in that individual, especially now as young people are looking for leadership in this area and looking for managers to help them develop as people.
Well, I think I think the main thing that Mr. Van Tuyl taught me was it was on the job training more than it was going to classes. We and back in the early '70s, there was a lot more face to face, like your father was talking about, and what his passion was. He was a farm boy from Lacine, Kansas, just south of Kansas City in Kansas. Uh, Grew up on a farm, never went to college, joined the Navy, got out of the Navy, went to work at a Leeds plant, which manufactured cars. Knew that there was more to life than that. Went to work for a used car dealer in the downtown Kansas City. Got a $20,000 floor plan to sell used cars, and from there, the Chevrolet and Ford contacted him because he was selling more cars out the back door than the dealerships were selling out the front doors, and he parlayed that into like I said before, 129 franchises and 75 locations for several $billion to Berkshire Hathaway. But he did it by bringing young guys up like myself, teaching them the business, doing things the right way, and putting you into an opportunity to buy out with a small investment that you would put in. You ended up having the income pay him back over a period of time, and you could buy him out over a 5-10 year period. But I would have never been able to afford to do that on my own. My dad was a pharmacist, had a little pharmacy downtown Kansas City, from New York, like I talked about. And, if you work hard, you get lucky, and the harder you work, the luckier you get. But his passion was bringing young guys up that really wanted to work and spend the time and not have the entitlement thought process that a lot of young kids coming out of college or coming out into the marketplace had. And I was very lucky to get with that organization. He brought me up and ended up putting me in a deal in Decatur, Illinois, and then I ended up buying him out in the mid-'80s, and that's what afforded me to move to Kansas City, and all the rest is history. And like I say, it's in the book. Some of the things that I'm just talking off my head right now about things that are in the book, but a lot of the chapters are the history of how I got to where I am today, and this is going to sound a little cheeky, but if I can do it, anybody can do it. I didn't have anything when I started. I had a order pad and a bid book for used cars and Desire, and I looked at successful salespeople in the dealerships and tried to market my beliefs in myself and beliefs in my faith, and tried to team them together with the guys that were selling cars. And I didn't have a great day every day, but over the long haul, it turned out pretty good.
How many dealerships did you get up to at your height? How many dealerships did you own?
Well, I had 8, I guess, 8 franchises and 2 locations, and ended up selling the Auto Plaza, which got me down to the 4 that I had in Decatur, and then I bought Chevrolet and Oldsmobile and Toyota in Lawrence. So I went from 8 to 4 to 7 to 2 right now.
Things, car dealers, car salesmen always got a bad rap. And movies, everything. Like they're the sick guys trying to con you into doing it. But I noticed that when I bought cars, that the car salesmen that I would deal with were very laid back and were just good listeners. And the guys who seem to be quiet and reserved and just came up and asked you how you could help. They seem to have all the plaques on their wall.
Mm.
All the salesmen of the month. What's it take to be good in that job? For the long term, and what can we learn from people who sell cars about sales in general?
Well, I think it's longevity. I've prided myself in my organizations on taking care of people, paying them well, uh, having them respect the business. You know, uh, on a credibility scale, the car industry is on the low end of that credibility scale, and that was established a long time before I was born. I think more than anything, but what you try to do in the real world is it's a business, and people are spending a lot of money to buy a car, and it becomes more money than what they have because they have to borrow money to pay for the car. But I think it goes back to your roots. Basically, is if you're a good person and you want to do the right thing, and you can't, you got to have, first of all, you got to have uh, in your heart that you want to succeed. I didn't get to where I am because I just woke up one day and I'm a car dealer. I had to go, I had to pay my dues, so to speak. But I think it's confidence. Once you start selling cars and you get in a position, I sent you that uh, email from one of
Yeah.
my key sales guys, and I changed when he read my book. He sent me something that changed his life. He was not doing what he wanted to do until he came to work for us, and believe me when I tell you this, because it's very true, is I didn't do this by myself. I had a knack of finding people that wanted to work, they wanted to get up early, stay late. They knew they weren't entitled. There was no entitlement there. If they worked hard, they succeeded. But that's what it's all about. And I think, as we were talking about before, uh, is having a solid base to succeed. As we call it, a Midwestern mentality that you're going to be there forever. You're going to take care of these customers forever, or as long as you can. And that's all people want. They just want to be taken care of. If you got a problem, and this is something else that I learned years ago, is when a customer would walk in the door and they had a problem. Uh, it, when you got a problem with the car, it's monumental, no matter what it is. If it's a flat tire, if it's a oil leak, whatever it might be, it's a problem. And so having a confrontation at that point is not a good thing, because it becomes a battle. But if you have somebody come in and you can, and I had one of the best, my general manager that I brought from Decatur when I went to Kansas City, he was one of the best at diffusing customers' issues. And he'd walk out of there and they'd be arm in arm, just loving each other, because that's all people want to do, is just be taken care of. And if you're selling a product, you're not making as much money as what the product sells for, but it ends up being a situation where you just take care of people. And being at a dealership for years, there is a it's like having your parents, when you're having a babysitter at your house and your parents come home, the kids go to sleep, and they can sleep very peacefully knowing mom and dad is back in the house. Well, same kind of deal as if I've been in a dealership for 20, 30 years, customers keep coming back, sending their families, and the reputation precedes itself.
It's funny you should say this. I had teach entrepreneurship at Vin University. I had two of my students who've built a really nice artificial intelligence company, like a chat, GPT, and they have 2,000 corporate clients. And they said they were speaking to a class of MBA students at our school, and they said the one thing they learned, they're only 22 years old, that nobody cared about how the technology was developed or how it was made. All they wanted to know was how would they take care of them as customers. He said he said at the end of the day, nobody cares about your technology. They just care that it does what it's supposed to do and that you answer the phone and are there to help them, whatever the problem is. And
Right.
I guess in a way, customer service hasn't really changed, but now even people have higher expectations of what they should be receiving.
Well, the the reality of a car salesman or a technician of today is not a lube oil and filter guy getting all greasy and dirty. With the computers that are in the cars right now, you become a technician, a computer technology student, because you have to plug it in, find out what the problem is, and it automatically tells you what it is. Before, you used to have to get inside the car, and if you heard a knock or an oil leak, you had to go find it. Well, now it automatically tells you that as much as you can. But another way that reminded me of some way of getting customers to believe in you. If you got a problem with a car and I can't solve it, and I'll just offer your money back, because I'd rather stay friends and part company as I would to say, well, we're not going to take care of you because you really don't have a problem. It's the way the technology is, and the noise you're hearing is part of the computer or the process. And if you don't like it, hey, I get it. We can't make everybody happy, so let's just shake hands and part company. It's not rocket science.
Chapter 3, you highlight the importance of a supportive environment in developing a career. In what way did you actively cultivate, maintain your support system throughout your own career, and how did you navigate moments when that felt insufficient or was challenged?
Say that one again. I'm sorry.
Sure. In chapter 3, you highlight the importance of supportive environment in developing a career. In what way did you actively cultivate and maintain your support system throughout your career? And how did you navigate the moments when that support felt insufficient?
Well, I think the thing that mainly I talked about was kind of like what I talked about a little bit ago is hiring good people. I have two guys right now. I've had a lot of offers on selling the dealerships I have right now. That's a big number, and I have two key guys that have been with me. They were salespeople 30 years ago when I started the organization, and I've given them the opportunity to buy stock in my business, which gives them an ownership part of it. So they they hire people to do the job for them, and they've had that opportunity. And now these are guys that go in at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning and stay until the last customer is gone. But I think mainly is just hiring good people and being able to relate to them and let them do their job. I guess it's not micromanaging. We set goals and quotas every year on an annual basis, and then we set quotas every month. Have quota setting meetings, and they have to know where they're going, or you can't get there, right? You just make it so that it's, if you do the job, you'll get rewarded for it. And I think that it's just all about uh, the person who buys in on what you did. And a story I'll tell you that Cecil Dantile taught me was when I became general manager of his big store in Kansas City. I knew that his office, on his way from his office or from his home to his office, had to go by the dealership, and he wasn't in there every day. He would go to his office and deal with his other, but he'd stop by the dealership early in the morning, stand on the service drive. The service drive used to open up at 7:30 in the morning. Dealerships would open up at 8. And when I became general manager, I thought, well, I'll just get there early and be standing on that service drive when he gets there. And I'd drive in at 7:15, 7:30, and he'd already be there standing on the service drive. And I said, and I go, okay, well, and then we talk, and he'd go on to his office. Well, the next day I'd get there at 7 o'clock. Well, guess what? He'd be standing on that service drive. And so the next day I'd get there about 6:45, and he'd be there. Well, the long story short is that he wasn't there to make sure that I was coming to work. He was there to check to be sure that I was understood that we get there early and we stay late, and doesn't matter when the staff gets there. It's when you get there and let them know that you're working to be sure that things are going the right way. So I learned that lesson from him. Is it's the quality of your work, not the quantity of your work. So I think just getting people to do it for you.
A lot of young people worry about work-life balance. They saw the generation before them, my generation, maybe your generation, and they see how much we've worked 6 days, 7 days a week, long hours, and they don't want that for themselves. What's your advice about how do you handle young people today who are looking for that work-life balance that don't necessarily want to be coming in super early or at least staying super late?
Well, that's a good question. I've had that question asked me before. I think it has to do with what their desires are to succeed, and I think we do a disservice to the young people if we allow them. I mean, they got to pick and choose. I always tell somebody that comes to work for me, here's your employee manual. This tells you what our company rules and regulations are, but it also gives you an outline on what you need to do to succeed. I think that, and I don't, I brought my daughter, who's a elementary school teacher, in because she was afraid she was going to lose her job in education in Kansas City. And I said, well, just come to work for me. And I've been trying to get them. I've got 2 daughters. One's in Boston as a hospice and palliative care company, and the other one's a preschool teacher that takes care of special needs kids. So they both have big hearts, and they got that from my parents and their grandparents, and we've passed it down to we care about people, and my philosophies they learned were do the right thing. Same thing that my parents taught me. But my daughter's, when I came, her first job was to change the employee manual and update it because it's been years since that happened. And she went through it. She said, Dad, you're going to have to get in the 21st century. And 21st century to me means doing things that are not old school, for instance, but I still think that if you give young people directions and show them a path, that they will listen to you. Not everybody's going to do it, but I think I just think that you can't be entitled, because it just takes hard work in our business, particularly. You know, if I was a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse or whatever it is, you'd have to go to school to become that profession. You don't have to go to school to be a car salesman. You have to learn how to do it, and you have to be sharp enough to be able to understand that. But I just think entitlement right now in the young people is a shame, and you know, life's too short to try to change some of those kids, but some of them you can. I've had I've spoke at the business school at the University of Kansas with my book, and given my book to these kids and signed little notes to them, and I've had half a dozen of them that want me to spend some time with them to mentor them because of what they've gotten out of the book. And that's my drive at this point, is what it says on the front of the book: opportunity for us, or for me and my experience, to be able to help you with your life and change your life or your business career, hopefully.
You discussed adapting your plans and goals in response to unforeseen circumstances like OPEC oil embargo and the sale of Auto Plaza. Can you share an example of a time when you had to completely abandon a well-laid plan, and what steps did you take to navigate that unexpected shift and create a new path forward? What did you learn from that?
Well, let's talk about the Auto Plaza. Uh, I was in Decatur, Illinois, and I was bringing up a guy who had been with me for several years, and the MO of Cecil Van Tile's side of it is put a young guy in, give him an opportunity to buy out like he did for me. Well, that's what I'm gonna call him Pat. That was his name, and he wanted to do the same thing. And I brought him up in the business in Decatur, and we were looking for a deal for him. And lo and behold, the Auto Plaza in Kansas City in Olathe, which is a suburb, became available. And Mr. Van Tile said, "Well, why don't you promote Pat to the dealerships in Decatur, which was my farm for Pat, uh, and come back to Kansas City and buy this Auto Plaza." And we had that chance to do that. Well, I had a 14, 12-year-old daughters who were 6 months old and 2 years old when we went to Decatur. So me taking them out of Decatur, 12, 14 years later, was like killing them. But even though we had family and friends in Kansas City, they were leaving out of town. So I flew them into Kansas City. We drove around. My mom and dad were still there. And my roommates in colleges were still there, and friends, and my wife's family was there. And flew them over the town, showed them the culture side of it, talked more about it, and then flew back to Decatur. Well, we ended up buying the deal. Moved them to Kansas City. They were heartbroken, and it was awful for me personally. Let's just put it that way. I made their lives miserable. Well, we had an investment banking group come through Kansas City buying deals, and they targeted my Auto Plaza. They made us an offer I couldn't refuse. Ended up selling those, and my kids said, "Dad, if you're going anywhere, you're going by yourself." So I had to pivot real quick on that, and they weren't going back to Decatur. They weren't moving with me to buy another deal. So I had to I had another deal already prospected in another town, and I was going to go because it was a great opportunity. Well, I took 2 years off to settle them down. They became older teenagers, they ended up, sharp young ladies, went to college, and I had that's the reason why I'm in Lawrence, Kansas, is because I ended up buying those stores, so I didn't have to move my family, and it was a tough thing for me because I didn't make a mistake because the financial side of it is, but sometimes a business decision you think is the right one may not be the right thing to do for your family. So everything worked out. You look in a crystal ball and hope for the best, but at that time, it was pretty bad for me.
That everybody is seeing that giant ring on your finger. Can you tell the audience about that ring, how you got it?
Yeah, in the book, it kind of explains. When I was in Illinois, we furnished cars to athletic departments and trade outs for tickets and advertising for the universities. And some of the people listening may already know that. But at Illinois, my first courtesy car coach was Dick Nagy, who was the assistant coach at Illinois. Decatur is 30 miles from Decatur. So I was over there watching games, and Dick and I developed a relationship. And as I say later in some of this stuff, is that's what life's all about, is developing relationships and wherever you are. And so in 1984, Illinois wins the Big Ten championship, basketball championship. And he ended up buying the ring for me, going against the grain because I'm not an athlete. I was a donor and a supporter, and it was only for athletes and coaches and staff that they buy these rings for. Dick bought the ring for me because he felt like I was a better supporter of Illinois athletics than a lot of alums. So I come to Lawrence, Kansas after the Auto Plaza, buy the deals in Lawrence where the University of Kansas is. Bill Self is hired in 2003 as the head basketball coach, and he shook hands with me when we met, and he asked me what that ring was, since it was an Illinois ring, and I told him the story, and he said, "Well, I'm going to replace that for you someday." Obviously supporting Kansas athletics. So in 2008, when KU won the national championship in San Antonio, he had one of his coaches come up to me and say, "Hey, what's your ring size?" 4 months later, when they got the rings, he brought me a ring and presented it to me and replaced the Illinois ring. And that story's in the book. But the ring I've got on my finger now is the 22 Kansas national championship ring again. And since 08, I've gotten the rings. My wife gets a lavalier with the top of the ring on it. And we furnish cars to the Kansas athletic department. And not players at this point, but we do some players because of the NIL program. So that's what the ring is all about that I'm wearing. And I'm not a Kansas graduate. My businesses are in Lawrence. And if you're in business in Lawrence, Kansas, and you're not involved with KU athletics or the university, you're missing a good opportunity for marketing. So
You
that's how I
can't
got it.
connect with people if you don't do that, especially in those kind of college towns where sports is so prominent. We have a question from the audience. Your 18 core principles emphasize integrity, perseverance, and community involvement. Have there been moments where where following these principles has led to unintended negative consequences, such as a business deal falling through, or difficult leadership decision? In other words, how do you balance staying true to your principles while adapting to the realities of business competition and personal growth?
Wow, that's a good one, and it makes me very proud what I do. It gives me, when I think about it, I will tell you this, I'm a very soft-hearted guy. When I talk about family and success, for me is not, it's emotional for me because I didn't get here without a lot of help and a lot of backing, family sacrifices, I spent a lot of time at work. My wife did a lot of the training and education part of it. She's an educator herself. So when I was at work till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, some nights years ago, she took care of the kids, put them to sleep and things like that. But my dad was and I mentioned him a minute ago, and I'll get to the question. My dad uh, grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Uh, he went to University of Columbia Pharmacy School. Every other year, he was a prize fighter to make enough money to get him through pharmacy school. And back in the 20s, it wasn't very expensive, but it was still you had to make a living to be able to go through it. But he was a soft-hearted guy. Did a lot of philanthropic stuff. When my parents moved to Kansas City, they combined synagogues. My dad handled the religious side of it. My mom handled the sisterhood side of it, and 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 was very philanthropic that way. Uh, but he has still had that Archie Bunker mentality of being a tough guy. But when he'd stand up in front of a crowd and start talking about family, he'd start tearing up, and he drew that down to me the same way as far as emotion when you talk about family. And I've been very lucky in my life to get a lot of awards and rewards and accolades, and this opportunity to talk to people and talk to you, Mark. So it's emotional for me, but I just believe that you have to have beliefs. You have to believe. I say my prayers every night. I pray for my friends that have died. I pray for my friends that are sick. I pray, and like I said, I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family that taught us the values of life, and so it's not hard for me to stay true to it. Sure, I've been called, and there's a slang out there that says I'm going to Jew you down in the business, and if I've heard that once, I've heard it thousands of times. But if I took it personally, I probably wouldn't be in the car business or in the sales business. But I understand that people don't know I'm Jewish, but calling somebody something that is a slang is not something I believe in. It's not something that I would promote. And I just have my faith. I have my beliefs. I have the thought process in my mind, and I instill in my people. And I'll tell anybody this: just do the right thing. You know what the right thing is to do, and you can do that. You can make money as in a job without sacrificing anything that you think is a shortcut. Cecil Van Tile taught me that we go to the edge, we just don't go over the edge. It may take you a little longer to make the kind of money you want to make, but stability and longevity and being able to go home and sleep at night means more to me than making a lot more money than what I am making now. I mean, at some point in your life, and I know that that's why I wrote the book, is not that I have everything and want people to share in what I've been able to do, but I don't think you got to be a bad person to succeed, and that's what my life has been.
You emphasize the importance of transparency when problems arise. Could you share an example of a time when being upfront about bad news, even when difficult, ultimately strengthened the relationship with a customer, employee, or a supplier?
Uh, well, I'll tell you this about having to tell somebody something. Uh, it's anticipation. Anticipation. Um, there's a saying that I've got, face what you fear, and the death of fear is certain. And that means that when I was selling cars and had to prospect, and I had to make 10 phone calls, it was horrible for me to call somebody and have them hang up on me or tell me that they weren't interested in buying a car. But that was part of my job. I'd take salespeople down the street, and we'd knock on doors during the energy crisis when nobody was coming out to look at cars. But I think that when a customer walks in the door, and I've used this a lot, is once I shake hands with a customer coming into the dealership, there's some kind of electricity that goes through our bodies, and then I relax. But something that I had to do 17, 18 years ago was, my mom, I think, was in her 90s, and my daughter got a divorce, and I felt so bad about that. I was scared to call my mom for the fear that she would break down or she would do something. But her answer to me after a short pause was, well, nobody died, so everything's going to be all right. So I think that if you have a confrontation, or you have a situation that you have to deal with a negative situation, face it and deal with it, because it's it's that saying, face what you fear, and the fear will go away at that point. So
In the face of unexpected challenges like COVID-19, I'm wondering how you survived COVID-19, and what did you tell your people when everything was locked down and people weren't buying cars? What did you tell your people? How did you get them over what must have been a traumatic experience for them?
well, let me tell you this, and you're probably going to laugh at me, but I'm not smart enough to be scared. I learned something. I've been through energy crisis. I've been involved in the Volkswagen deceptive practice situation. Just when I thought I was going to be a volume Volkswagen dealer, and had come from Houston talking to Michael Horn, who was the head of Volkswagen America, about giving me markets that didn't have representation in. On Thursday, getting up Friday morning, all excited about the opportunity to find out that they had this deceptive practice, which meant they had to pay billions of dollars to get that settled. I went through the sticky pedal deal with Toyota, where they had to, they call it they had a floor mat problem, and they were sued by people, and had to handle that. So there's been some opportunities that you just I've tried to relay to my people. Watch ESPN and read the sports page. Leave all the other stuff up to me, and we'll be okay. So when COVID hit, and nobody knew anything about it at all, us included, whether it was going to be a 90-day thing or a 6-month thing, or it could be the death of a lot of businesses because people couldn't get out. So we just did what we had to do, was like everybody did. If you become an organization that we were allowed in the service department to be open, and then people wore masks, people adhered to the regulations, and all of a sudden, after I think a few months, people were out buying cars because they didn't want to be cooped up in their house, buying motorhomes, wanting to travel, wanting to get around. So, whenever when every door that closes in my life opens another door, and that's what I kept telling you. You got to come to work. You got to be ready for the situations, and our business has been booming ever since. People are buying cars. The supply chain is an issue, but we're making things happen. But to the point of the question, did we? The unknown was there. There's no question about it. But you keep your wits about you, and you deal with it, and you just hope and pray that things are going to turn around, and they did, and have.
We have a question from the audience. Facing fear is good advice, but the reality is it wears people down psychologically and even financially. What's your advice for people who are trying to face their fears?
Well, I guess I'd ask the question: what's the fear? Is it a family situation that causes the fear? Is it a financial situation that causes the fear? Uh, I I don't. I think there's a lot of situations out there that would be, like telling my mother that's not a business fear, right? That's not a fear of loss for lack of income. But I think it's in the book. Let me tell you this: that the proceeds on my book go to charity. So I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this to help people. And if one person who's listening today, or one person buys the book in a bookstore, uh, then I've succeeded. So if there's something specific, I'm happy to answer any questions. Call me. I'm happy to give you my email address, Mark, and you can pass it out on my phone, whatever. But I think that you just look at what the situation is, and asking for help is not a bad thing. Um, you you If you're looking for that, kind of a funny side story to this is, my book publisher was walking through the airport in Kansas City, and my book is on display at the gift shop there. And I'm not a bestseller. I think it's the bestseller, but you got to sell so many books for a period of time. But we haven't done that. But I think it's a pretty good book. But my book was sitting right next to Patrick Mahomes's book, and so I felt like that was a pretty good place on the shelf for my book to be next to him as quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, and pretty well known in Kansas City and in the NFL. But if I could give any advice as far as the fear thing that we were talking about, you got to dig in your heart and find out, what's the best avenue for you in the situation, and get help. Whether it's reading a book, or whether it's getting a family member, or if you feel bad enough, then you need to get some kind of medical help as well. So I I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
To say thank you for taking the time to speak to us. The hour went very quick. And I know that if you are getting involved with college students, especially business students, they're going to love the experience that you have. Because I find that my own students, I'm 64, I give them perspective. When they get overwhelmed, I'm able to go and calm them down and have them take a longer term perspective. Because I had a student the other day, it said to me, she's struggling in her first job. And she goes, I didn't think my 20s would be so difficult.
mm,
And so, and she told me what she was going through. And I said, you're still a superstar. You're just the beginning of your career. You're going to make mistakes. things are going to go up and down the rest of your life. You got to stay even keel with this and realize, like your mom had said, as long as no one dies, it's no big deal at the end of the day. And I think that's what young people need to be reminded of constantly, that that life is a pressure cooker, and each generation is becoming more difficult than the prior generation. But at the end of the day, you have to realize, like you said, you have to stick to your core principles, and that's going to get you through. So I thank you so much for taking the time. Thank folks for listening in today. And I'll look forward to staying in contact with you. Sometime you and I will just have to talk, spend time talking about sports because I'm such a big sports fan.
Yeah.
Everybody have a good rest of your weekend. Take care.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you being involved.